crisis management is a taza topic, right? It's something that I think comms professionals revel in, but also it tests the mettle of CEOs, legal teams, and pretty much the organization. So thank you all for being here. Just to set context, I think earlier crises used to unfold over a news cycle, but now one wrong tweet, a screenshot, a hot mic, right, can just spark a crisis. And these women here have been right there in crisis war rooms. So it's, I think, without an old fogey like me, the experience here is still nearly 100 years of comms experience. So welcome and thank you all for joining. Yeah. So let me just start with Tarunjit. Maybe you can take us through. You've been around in the space in the pre-internet era, the internet era, now with the rise of influencers and AI, Tarunjit. So why don't you just sort of help contextualize for us how crises have evolved over the last couple of decades?
Okay. Am I audible? Yes. Okay. Hi. So crises, I think, have evolved drastically in the last, I would say, 5 years. In the yeah. Okay. In fact, I think all of us have seen a pre-internet era, pre-web era, pre-Orkut era. In fact, right? One of the most precious commodities that we had when we were managing crises earlier was time. Yeah? And time is the same commodity that we are missing today. You know, when we used to get into the midst of a crisis earlier, our only competition was tomorrow's newspaper. Yeah? So you had time to huddle, you had time to plan, strategize, and probably take out a statement that would happen out there and go out to the press. Do a stop press. In fact, we've done stop presses as well. Then came the advent of all of the channels and breaking news headline and a 24/7 news cycle that refused to stop. And we thought that was the height of crisis management. And then came social media. Right? Social media, in fact, again, made sure that crises were reported, updated, not at the pace of developments happening in the crisis, but at the pace of outrage. Yeah? Any outraged teenager with a ring light and a phone could now talk about you, give an opinion, have you crucified, have you cancelled in the court of public opinion. And you'd probably be it, that'd probably be it. And we thought maybe that's it, that's the end of it, you know. We kind of upskilled ourselves and made sure that, okay, let's manage this. And then came AI. Deepfakes. You probably have now, we could have CEOs dressed up in Halloween costumes sitting on the moon and probably talking about a crisis that never existed. And it has happened. And in fact, today, again, the most precious commodity out there is again time. So the more you pick up and move forward with it, and move with the way audiences are communicating, move with the way audiences are, transferring trust on various mediums, is how we kind of upskill ourselves and make sure that we stay ahead of the curve. Though I think a lot of times, I think my co-panelists will agree, 24 hours are very less for it.
Sure. So clearly, time is a commodity that's at a premium these days. Akanksha, I want to draw you in. Can you talk us through some recent well-known Indian and global examples of crisis? And more importantly, does crisis only impact reputation or are there other implications to crises?
Thanks, Brian. So I just want to add before I begin to what Tarunjit said. I think that it was easier in the yesteryears where we had internal crisis and external crisis, and so we learned in PR school. Now there's a new format, which is virality-led crisis and bad narrative-led crisis. Let me take a moment to explain that to you. So like Tarunjit said, there's a little kid who, for example, saw, I don't know, something wrong in your bag and put that out and said, the CEO has a white powder in her bag and you can make your deduction out of it. Or you can just have a brand that's completely tone deaf. You've seen this with Tanishq, where I'm sure you guys have all followed that ad where there was a Hindu family and a Muslim lady married into a Hindu family, and there's a God Bharai ceremony that's happening. A brand like Tanishq doesn't get it wrong. A brand like Tata doesn't get it wrong. So what happened there, right, guys? So just tone-deaf narrative at a certain level. So crisis is deeper and crisis is everywhere is what I wanted to just supplement to what Tarun said. To give you some examples of crisis that I feel are different, that we must acknowledge is, everybody looked at the Burger King, McDonald's, heard of that? The fake paneer situation. What happened there really, right? It was just misinformation. It was misalignment. It's just someone, a very trigger-happy person who decided to take a very ill-known fact and said, okay, let me take iodine and put it on doodh or paneer or whatever other bit that could be, and decided to say, ye galat hai. So bad use of platform. But can you stop it? The gentleman before me spoke, waxed eloquence about trust, right? Trust is fragile. So what happened there, right, for that crisis? McDonald's came out with a statement, Domino's came out with a statement. What I want to bring to your notice is when it comes to crisis, labeling is your win. So how did all these companies win? They labeled it as misinformation. So imagine if you were a lawyer and you were fighting this in court, what you would do is fight exactly the same fight. Then you'd bring in factual data, then you'd bring in scientists, you'd bring in visual assets because you have to fight visual asset with visual asset. So what I want to share is calling it something always helps reduce the blow a little bit. From an international crisis perspective, my favorite is, anybody here, show of hands, followed the Johnny Depp Amber Heard very public divorce / yeah. So what happened there, right? I mean, she wrote an op-ed. Guys, you'll be surprised to see, and my PR folks will agree, op-eds are bastardized in today's day and age. We use op-eds for personal vendetta, and that's #1 place for crisis management. I feel we should stop op-eds. Barring Sarika's in reputation today, we should ban op-eds, in my opinion. But, Amber Heard wrote a great op-ed, published by a very credible publication, zero fact-checking. What did Johnny Depp do? Johnny Depp firstly found a place where he could have standing. So I'm not going to get into what happened in the case. I'm just going to presume we know. But how did he fight this crisis, folks? He basically went to a very small court of law, which would support his standing. So he found good place to, he basically found support, like an army to support. And then he brought in visual cues, visual assets, spoke the truth. So he found one truth. At no point of time did you see him say no to anything. I don't know if any of you noticed this. I've been down that rabbit hole for more hours than I would like to admit. And he never said no. He just said, this happened, but this was the real deal. This happened, but this was the real deal. So broken record strategy over and over again. And my last submission before I guess I end this question, is Amber Heard generally got the rough end of this stick. Social media villainized her before she could, she lost in the court of public opinion before she could lose the case at all. So in a crisis, guys, what I want to say is that facts are not enough. Public perception, public army is extremely important, especially in case of personalities where you have a lot of parasocial trust. Parasocial trust is one-way love, like I love Kriti Sanon, I love Johnny Depp, he must be like this for me. So you can use that to your advantage, but it can also destroy you. So reputation versus identity crisis.
Thanks, Akanksha. Great segue to the next question that I had for Diana. Diana, can you talk us through, how AI, bots, and influencers have been sometimes weaponized by bad actors, and that has led to a trust deficit. And more importantly, how is that rewriting the crisis comm playbooks for organizations and brands?
Right. Thank you, Brian, and thank you, Tarunjit, and thank you, Akanksha. So, Brian, primarily the entire crisis playbook right now has entirely changed. Earlier, it was more like a fire drill, right? If something happens at the shop floor, here's what you will do. If something happens at the store, here's what you will do. If an employee says something, here's what you will do. Right now, one tweet, like you mentioned, one post somewhere, one WhatsApp video, it just throws things out of proportion. So the challenge here is how you verify what you see and how you act fast. I think verify first, act fast, or react fast rather, is where we are headed to right now. That I think if a lot of organizations and brands take cognizance of, firstly admitting and acknowledging that yes, there is a problem, and saying that, okay, we will find a solution. Secondly, talking to your internal audiences first. Hota kya hai, a lot of times people reach out to their, they put out statements, they bother about their customers, and they go, roam like headless chickens without really first addressing your primary audience, which is your employees, your stakeholders, ensuring that they are comfortable and telling them that, hey, this has happened, we're taking care of it, but, hang in there. And then, of course, most important is showing up. It's about when you have a reply, show up immediately within 1 hour, 2 hours, and humanize the reply and say what it is. And most important, when you don't have a reply, even then show up first. Show up saying that, okay, we acknowledge this has happened, and we're working towards it, and we're ensuring that it is taken care of. I think these three things are critical, and this is where the entire crisis narrative is shifting right now.
Showing up first is a really big deal. Showing up is a big deal, but showing up first is the biggest deal that you can take away from this session today.
Yeah. I think clearly you've got to be resourced to be able to show up first. So we'll get into that in the second section. But Shutapa, there have been examples of brands who have sometimes come out stronger from a crisis, right? We tend to think that crisis, sort of kills brands, but you have. So can you share some of those examples where, either brands have emerged unscathed or perhaps even stronger from a crisis?
Thanks, Brian. For a brand to emerge unscathed or stronger, their entire brand identity has to be strong in the first place. Right. Because at least the examples that I'll tell you are quite well known. So internationally, the whole Johnson & Johnson Tylenol case, I mean, it's urban legend, it's cult, it's history, it's everybody's taught how to handle crisis management looking at that case of 1982. Back home, take Amul or any of our bigger brands, even an Indigo Airlines, every single month there will be a crisis. Every single year there'll be something that will happen which will force them to kind of reallocate their attention towards getting out of that sticky situation. It helps when you take ownership, and I think all our speakers are saying the same thing. Honesty and taking ownership and not being defensive, especially if you're in the wrong over here. I can tell you that a lot of brands start becoming over-aggressive. And for that, I think a lot of us on this side, because we are the ones who are advising brands, we kind of tell them, hey, go in there, like hit it out of the ballpark. You can do it, but there is a pace to the way you can handle a crisis. A certain calmness and responsibility has to come from the brand, and that comes not only from the brand and the teams, but also the people like us, our teams, who are pushing them or handling them. So take Amul, for example. I think the way they've handled every crisis that has come is phenomenal. The strong brand, the emotional connect that Amul has with Indians has ensured that we still keep buying. I mean, maybe an Amul Chas had a little worm, doesn't stop me from consuming it. It's because I know that they would have fixed the problem. And once they fix it, they make sure that people are hearing about it. So whether it is a test or whether it's about giving people access to see how the packaging is actually done to win back the trust, and then using the digital tools, which are, they're two sides of a coin. We love the digital world because we can get our word out there, but at the same time, you can get cancelled within half an hour. So how do you utilize the old world tools of communications, public relations, and kind of amplify it with the new age tools that we have of social media, influencers? Sure. I think that has proven to be very good for some brands. Indigo's done it really well as well. A passenger goes and has a bad experience, it's all over social media. It doesn't stop us from taking Indigo. Why? Because they rule 60% of the skies even now. Their prices are quite competitive, they're going overseas. So their brand presence, their work is so strong that they're able to get out of these crises.
Sure, thanks. I think this first section has helped to sort of contextualize crisis and some of the imperatives. I mean, time is clearly a premium. The second section, why don't we talk a little bit and delve a little more into what the playbook sort of looks like, right, at a brass tacks level. And I know each of you comes from a different specialist lens. So, Taranjeet, maybe we'll start with you and talk about, like, let's take like a tech MNC, for example, operating across various markets, has a B2B presence, also has a B2C presence. What does the playbook typically look like for a large MNC?
So for a large MNC or for a smaller one, some of the basic rules remain the same.
Yeah.
You have to prepare, practice, and keep repeating it every single day, every single week. And some of the golden rules that come into a playbook is one, always look at predicting and envisaging what could be a possible crisis. Hence, we have a saying in PR which says that, we tell our clients that your doctor, your lawyer, your CA, and your PR person, you have to tell us everything. I'm sorry, there are no secrets there. Because any one of them could turn into a crisis. And every one of these verticals are then envisaged by us to be able to figure out what could be a possible crisis. Once you figure that out, you have a matrix ready in terms of ready statements on what could be possible crisis, what could be the possible response. And this is a scenario, this is a workshop, especially with MNCs and with MSMEs and with startups. We keep repeating every month on month, keep refreshing every month on month. Earlier, we used to do this once a year. Now it's become a quarter activity. Or with some very volatile segments, it's become a monthly activity, right? Once you look at doing that, and it's a very, very important point that a lot of people forget, When there's a crisis, it's usually the one CEO that is put out there. He or she might not be the right person to address a particular crisis, right? So you have to be able to figure out when you build this matrix, if it's a crisis deals with legal or finance or HR or culture, you have to have various segments or various kinds of spokespeople ready for it. Okay. Because each one connects differently with the audience. Each one's, knowledge about that sector is very different. And yes, you should have the CEO next to you to be able to do that, right? So this is a very important sector that you need to, so while these are the basics, what has increased for us is the frequency of it again. Right?
Yeah.
With the changing global political scenarios as well, this is something that is coming up more frequently. The second rule book that we look at is first identifying what is a crisis. Is it really a crisis or is it a crisis for somebody's ego? Yeah, that's very important.
Yeah, maybe you could talk a little bit about that. I mean, what are the difference between issues and crisis? Maybe the others can jump in as well.
Absolutely.
These terms are sort of very loosely thrown about. So how do what distinguishes a crisis from a issue?
Absolutely. I think my co-panelists will agree. We've done many a crises where we've worked overnight to figure out what the crisis is, create a playbook, create a statement, and then to figure out, well, nobody cares. Right? Nobody cares about it.
Yeah, so that's interesting, right? Does it qualify as a crisis once it gets out, or is it so far as it doesn't get out?
Crisis happens at every point. The way I would look at distinguishing a crisis between an issue, crisis is something that will impact your consumers. It'll impact your brand trust, brand credibility, brand reputation. Everything else is a personal issue.
Sure,
yeah?
sure.
And this is a very tough thing to say. And it requires a lot of strong PR and CopCom professionals with a lot of, I think, guts to stand up in front of a CEO and say, well, it's an issue. It's your personal issue.
Sure.
Not a crisis.
Sure. Somebody would like to add?
Yeah, I wanted to
Yes,
add just to what you asked, what is a crisis and what is an issue? Long hours working at one of the big four knowledge partners. I think we know one of the knowledge, big companies.
Sure.
Working long hours without work-life balance is an issue. An employee passing away because of it would be a crisis for the brand, as we saw.
So I have a slightly different opinion. I think issues become crisis. I think we just don't see them fast enough. And I'm of the firm belief that 90% of all issues start internally. It's something that you haven't seen. A crisis is a fracture in the company's ecosystem. It's a difference between what a company says and what a company does, what a person says and what a person does. So it does start internally. So all crises, in my opinion, at some point at least start internally. There is enough and more external crisis. I think we all get that, but I think that's an acknowledgement that I want to make. And how does it matter what the difference between an issue or a crisis is? What we need to understand is each one needs to be dealt with the science that Tarunjit read out to you, spoke to you about, right? Unfortunately, India doesn't work with playbooks. Our brands don't work with that kind of playbooks. They don't take a lot of this kind of training or investment into these kind of bits very seriously. You can see this with startups. I mean, everyone, all of us, I think, are managing a startup of 2, if I may agree. And we know that some of them take it seriously, some of them don't. So whether an issue or a crisis, it requires the same amount of importance.
Sure, sure. Diana, you wanted to add something
Just to
this,
add
others,
to
yeah?
what Akanksha said, I handle a brand, a very popular luggage brand based in Bangalore. I can name it, it's Mokobara. So when Mokobara, had this entire crisis a couple of months ago on, someone put out a tweet on X saying that, it's a Chinese copy and you're buying Chinese brands and you're paying so much just for the branding and all of that. And the internet went crazy. It happened at night. So by the time, and we obviously were, like the head of marketing called us, the founders called us, and 12 a.m. to 1 a.m. to 2 a.m., what do we do, how do we react? So in the morning, we decided that fine, let's not, again, jump around and start, putting out statements out there. We don't need to. So the founders, and the very next day, we had a very important Naruto series launch. So the founders had a very cheeky response to it. They put out a tweet saying that, while the world debates chicken and the egg, that who came first, here we are doing our work, launching a great collection. It rolls out at 10 a.m. tomorrow, and use the use the code white label and get a 10% discount. That's what they did, So the next day, we sent the release out as planned. Journalists went crazy, kept calling us, saying that, can they comment on this? Can they comment on the tweet? And we were like, yeah, send us questions, and we got some phenomenal response. The Naruto collection otherwise had no hope to go to mainline papers, but because of this one tweet, that guy, thankful to him, and we got crazy coverage from the Times to Hindu to CNBC to everyone covered it. Everyone spoke about the cheeky response that the founders gave and spoke about, how they used white label, which was supposed to be derogatory to their advantage. Use that as a code. People got a discount. Their mentions were over the roof. Their sales were over the roof, and it entirely worked for them. Yeah. So, what's an issue? What's this? And how do you deal with it? I think is what the magic lies in.
Sure, great, thanks. Sorry, Akanksha. Sorry, you want to add something?
Last one. I think, if I may sum it up, issues and crisis is the number of cups of coffee and the hours of sleep that we get.
Right, nice. Akanksha, I know that you've recently launched a PR division, specifically looking at celebrity PR. What does the playbook look like for celebrity PR as opposed to an enterprise? A person as a brand, rather. Yeah.
So I'm honest to a fault, and a lot of my friends will tell you that I'm blunt to a fault as well. There is no playbook, guys. I'd be lying if I told you that we've got it figured out. Yeah, no, there's no coffee. We need something stronger, ma'am. I promise you. A lot of things that are stronger than coffee must come into play. Meditation. That's all I meant. Meditation. No Madira, meditation. But, so we've launched a new company. It's called Cavalry Media. It mainly deals with the entertainment sector. It requires a certain different kind of creative muscle. It requires a very different kind of PR muscle to manage it, which is why we separated it from our core company. And what's the playbook? We must understand that we're dealing with feelings versus facts. Right? You're not dealing with reputation, you're dealing with identity. So that's one of the biggest distinctions to make when you're working with a celebrity. Our company also does something really cool. We manage celebrities like your mainstream guys, and we also manage CEO celebrities. So Anupam Mittal and the likes, right? So what happens is they're a very different ball game to play with. So firstly, we must understand that any brand is on point when it comes to personality more than the business that they've done. Right. Likability is a big factor. So whatever you're doing, or not, controversy is a big factor too. So whatever is on brand is extremely important when you're promoting a person or a personality. And I'm trying to make a playbook as I go along, Brian, as you can
But,
see,
yeah,
because
but interesting points, yeah.
yeah,
Let's see
and
the
I guess last but not the least, what I want us to remember is for a celebrity not showing up is death. So let's say that, actually, let me give you an example that we worked with. So Urfi Javed is someone that we've worked with for donkeys of years now. And, she went out to get a drink, and the next day was voting. It was voting day. And someone came to her and said, ma'am, will you vote, and who will you vote for? Typical, just snazzy articles that media likes. And she said, "Arey, mere paas to voter ID hi nahi hai."
Oh gosh.
Yeah. You know what I mean? It was such a casual remark. It was tongue-in-cheek. I didn't have the luck the Mokobara guys had, unfortunately. But what do you do with that, right? So like Tarunji had mentioned at the start, we did stop press, a lot of press. I also want you to know that when you manage celebrities, you need to have an ace up your sleeve. So truth doesn't always help. That means I'm bartering favors for a favor. So I'm saying, hey, drop the story so that I can give you something else. So media relations are extremely important. And last but not the least, we did a lot of press around it ourselves. So what that means is we turned it into tongue-in-cheek moment. We got her to say that again. We recorded a video so that people would, when you read something, it has a different tonality versus you see something. Right. So when it comes to celebrity PR, visual wins over writing at any point of time, and we seeded the hell out of that. So God honest truth.
Yeah, super. Diana, what is the crisis blunder that even smart companies repeatedly make?
Brian, I can maybe give you an example in this case,
Yeah.
Say someone as big as a Bonvita, okay? Now you have this influencer called Revant Hemat Singka, the food farmer.
Right.
So he, single guy, goes ahead and puts up this entire post on, how Bonvita mein itna sara sugar hai, and you're feeding your kids sugary drink and all of that. And, Bonvita obviously would have seen it, but socha hoga ki yaar, kya hi hoga? Like this one guy is saying, Bonvita mein sugar hai, hum saalon se Bonvita bech rahe hain. So ignored it, didn't react. Little did they know that that post has gone viral and it has gotten all over, right from Twitter and Instagram and X and Facebook, and mothers are sharing it on WhatsApp, and my mother is sharing it on my WhatsApp, and grandmothers and everyone are like, you're feeding your kids Bonvita, and it becomes like a big crisis, so much so that parents who start reading the label, moving out from that, starting to give their kids like healthier options, and then Bonvita wakes up that, okay, there is an issue. They wake up late, they send him a legal notice, they further add fuel to the fire. So they just, instead of acting wisely, they do these stupid things, so to say, What they could have rather done is, they saw huge backlash, dip in sales. I know so many people who stopped having Bonvita after that, so many, mothers like me as well, right, So what they could have rather done is, firstly acknowledge that post, saying that, hey, we hear you, give us some time to come back.
Yeah.
They didn't do that. Second, they could have, they've got tons and tons of money, right? They could have put like an entire series on, the whole scientific logic behind having that amount of sugar, or maybe when kids earlier would run in the park and play and they were so active, that sugar was good for them. Now with kids being more towards screen and indoors and pollution, maybe it's not right. But hey, we're taking note of it and we're making the changes, They could have maybe held like a panel of pediatricians and nutritionists and FSSAI people talking about how can they make that positive change. A brand with that muscle of money and reach could have done so much more. But they went behind petty things like send him a legal notice, do that, do this, do that. They got nowhere. And this guy today is a star. He's launched his own product line also. So, that's how it is.
Can I add something to what you're saying? So, back home in office, we say crisis gives birth to careers.
Yes.
Yeah, so we really believe that that's the case. And I also want to bring in that there are certain brands that don't get the cultural referendum of it. So let me explain what that means. Everyone's heard of Allyson Felix? She is the biggest track athlete to come out of the world, if not the US, right? And she got pregnant, and what did Nike do? Drop 70% of her pay. So sometimes crisis is essential because it changes industry. So I feel that Nike, how can Nike go wrong, right? Like to what you were saying, like how can Bonvita go wrong? And I feel that just sometimes culturally we don't get it. Had they just hugged Hemant and told him, "Samajh gaya humko, why don't you come on board of our millennial?" Everyone has a millennial advisor board, so let's make a millennial advisor board, right? So much could have been done.
Sure. So not reading the signs right, clearly. Shutapa, you've spent, you've been on the side of the media as well, right? And the first thing that companies occasionally send out these media statements. What do they get wrong or right? When you see a media statement, what does it, from a media professional standpoint, what should they be doing better?
Yeah, so, for the others who don't know, my first career was as a journalist. I spent about 12, 13 years before I started Dharma, which is in its 10th year now. So obviously when my team works and how they work is shaped by, a lot of it by my experiences as a journalist, so that we can at least mind read a little how media would react to things. I think the worst thing that a brand can do is send out tone-deaf comments, because people are looking for real reactions. The moment you say, oh, I'll get back to you later for a bit and then you get back, that's fine. You're getting your thoughts in order, you're getting your legal in order. But when you either over-legalize it, there's too much of jargon, they're not really understanding. Journalists are like, we're running with the story with one line with you saying no comment, or we'll get back to you. Something which is vanilla, something which is completely pure, it doesn't make sense. What journalists want, end of the day, is to add value to a story. They are going to run a story if there's a controversy, if there's a crisis. In some instances, yes, you could get, pull some strings and get a story dropped. But when you're handling a corporate brand, a consumer brand, media is not going to stop. What you can do is make sure that your voice is heard prominently and your brand side is represented. If you need to apologize for something, do so. What is the action that you're taking? That needs to have center. Many stories, many crisis situations between evening and next day's newspapers have changed completely. The crisis happened in the evening where the brand is like, getting all the brickbats. But in the morning, the headline is running on the action taken by the brand. And that's where I think all communications specialists come in, and handling the media is very important. So at least where I'm concerned and my team, we try to stay few steps ahead of media, not just with crisis, with anything, any pitch that we send, any story, just to make sure that we are able to at least try and give media what they want. At least we can try and understand, because I would understand what editorial guardrails are.
Yes, it's important.
A lot of it has changed, especially in primetime television. I do not hazard a guess what they will or will not carry. But at least with a lot of mainstream newspapers and online portals, you can still expect journalism and some editorial tenets, they do follow it. So we try to keep that in mind, and that's how we advise brands as well.
Thanks. Sorry, are we run out of time? Yeah? Okay.
Last comment.
Last comment, Taranjit.
So, I've been listening to what everybody's been saying, and one of the key things that is now I'm observing is that when was the last time you heard an Indian brand in the last 30 years say, I'm sorry? And I would give it to this generation who's asking questions, because I think as Gen Xers, boomers, and millennials, we were pretty dumb. Yeah? We were so involved in our own life, wanting to kind of, move ahead, let's move on, adjust muddy, all of that, that the next day's headlines didn't really matter after a day or two, right? And a lot of brands also relied on this. They also relied on our ignorance rather than our education. Yeah? Today, we have changed the stance, and we've all done that, where we've done a stop press, we've pulled out a story, we've used the might of an entire corporation, an MNC, to bully somebody and say, please stop that, you're not going to print the story. But today, Gen Z has changed that. And I'm really thankful to them for doing that. Despite all their flaws, they have given media a run for their money. Right? And media can't stop asking questions, because Gen Z is not going to stop asking questions.
All the Gen Zs are clapping. Thanks, Tarun, Dijit, and Akanksha, Diana, and Shutapa. Thanks so much.